right, Jason, how you doing?
Doing good, Joy.
You're doing good. This has been a strange week, and I just want to sort of give you guys, set the stage for the week that we're recording this episode of What to Read, and thank you all for tuning in.
What a crazy week.
It's been a crazy week. It's been a crazy week. Crazy, stressful week. These have been crazy, stressful weeks pretty much for an entire 4 years. But this one has been particularly interesting in a bad way. We had Donald Trump, having cleared the streets in front of the White House with tear gas and rubber bullets and pepper spray, which interestingly enough, Jason, I don't know if you realize that according to Attorney General Bill Barr, pepper spray is not a chemical agent.
Maybe we should fire it in his face and see how he feels.
Yeah, to see how he enjoys it, because he says it's not chemical. But you know who says that it actually is a chemical agent? The Department of Justice, who he works for. So he's a little confused, but he works for Donald Trump. That is a very good point. That's an excellent point. So we've got the Attorney General of the United States, trying to justify tear gassing and hitting rubber bullets, firing rubber bullets at priests, peaceful protesters, marchers, teenagers, whoever was outside the White House, so that Donald Trump could film this weird, commercially video of himself walking to St. John's Church and holding a Bible upside down, which is, a thing that, of course, Donald Trump would do. For whatever reason, I guess he just wanted to show his power or make himself look like Kim Jong-un. So you've had that. Let's put a pin in that. You've obviously had continued marches that are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. After he did that, the marches just got bigger in front of the White House. And so Donald Trump, who had hidden in a bunker to avoid the marchers because he was scared.
Bunker Boy was a trending.
It was trending.
Yeah.
Bunker Boy was actually trending because he hid in a bunker because he was scared of the marchers. And then he now has spent $62 million in taxpayer money. You're welcome, taxpayers, to build a giant wrought iron fence in front of the White House. So the People's House, the White House, which is owned by you, which is owned by the public, now has a giant wrought iron fence, and protesters have gone up to it and affixed pictures and Black Lives Matters posters and George Floyd, RIP kind of things in front of it. So it's become like a memorial to people who've been killed by police. So that's happened. You've got in Louisville, you've got huge protests going on because of the killing of Breonna Taylor, who police bust into her house with a no-knock warrant. Her boyfriend fired back because he's like, intruders are in my house, and he's a licensed gun owner. Police emptied 20 shots and killed this poor young woman. And now, we're still waiting to see what happens with that. There's an FBI investigation, so that's happening. Marches all over, not just the country, but all over the world. New Zealand, England, your hometown, London, England.
Represent.
Absolutely representing. You got Paris. There are marches there all over the world, and here's what they're marching about: human rights abuses in the United States. So now we're that country. We are a country against whom people all across the world march because of human rights abuses committed by our police and by you can't even say our military, because William Barr has created this black-clad, anonymous police-like force that he has deputized by pulling in Bureau of Prisons and all sorts of other sort of federalish agents around the country. They have no labels on. They have no identification on. No one knows who they are. Basically, the secret police. So we've got the secret police. We've got peaceful protesters being tear gassed. We've got unrest in the streets of the United States, and an election looming. We've still got primary elections going on. Joe Biden is now officially, as of this What to Read podcast, the nominee. He's got at least enough delegates to be the nominee of the Democratic Party. So it will be Biden v. Trump. And we are just hoping and praying it's a free and fair election. That's where we're at. So we're in a weird place right now. We're not in a good place right now in America. Not in a good place at all. And you think about Donald Trump as president and what he'll be and how he'll be thought of decades and decades from now, or even a decade from now, when people are looking back and they're sort of...
Again, a decade from now, what will he be thought of a week after he leaves office?
Week after he leaves office, absolutely. I mean,
that's when the truth is going to come out.
Absolutely. So I think you already have historians, the Michael Beschlosses of the world, the John Meachams of the world, and also journalists who are chronicling this day by day. I think we have to accept that we are actually chronicling not the history of an American president so much as a sort of sui generis sort of autocrat in America, because Donald Trump has he has fashioned his presidency based on the people he admires. And who does Donald Trump admire? He admires President Xi of China. He admires Kim Jong-un of North Korea. He admires Vladimir Putin. He admires Bolsonaro of Brazil. He admires dictators. He admires
Turkey's dictator.
Don't forget, right? Turkey's dictator Erdogan. He admires MBK, the dictator of Saudi Arabia, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia.
Loathes all of his allies.
We are a country that the world, and I've said this on previous What to Read podcast, pities. There's actually, the Canadian Prime Minister, who, by the way, is looking fine with that beard. Just saying. I'm just saying. He's had his issues in the past, but he's looking foist. He gave this sort of moving speech, sort of expressing pity for Americans. The Western allies that used to be our friends are looking upon us with shock, horror, and pity. And I have, even heard talk sort of swirling around that should we be, should international agencies be talking to the United Nations about, treating us the way that South Africa was treated in the 80s. That's how low we've sunk.
Funny though, Troy.
Yeah.
If the rest of the world is policing us, that is really weird. It's a real turnaround because we were considered I shouldn't say the leader of the world, but that's how we were looked at that way. But
yeah,
it's a shame when the rest of the world, France is looking down on us.
Everyone is looking at us with pity and horror, and we were the American president has been considered the leader of the free world since the end of World War II, and that would be FDR, Truman, Eisenhower, even Nixon still held on to that sort of moniker around the world because the United States, we've dropped into the basement. Meanwhile, 45, aka Donald J. Trump, aka the President of the United States, thank you very much, Electoral College, so is now planning to try to respond to all of the unrest that we're seeing in the country and the clear racial division that we're seeing in the country that he's exacerbating. That's his thing, to exacerbate racial divisions because, that's how he gets his base riled up and ready to go out and vote for him. His 45% of the country that no matter what he does will vote for him, is now apparently planning potentially to do a race speech. Oh, no. A race speech. So, as everybody knows, when then Senator Obama had his pastor kind of, speeches, or not speeches, but sermons from his pastor leak out. And ABC News, the report leaked out these sermons, and all of a sudden it was a big deal, and everybody went crazy over it. And so President Obama gave what's now known as the Philadelphia speech. If you don't remember the speech, you can always look it up in my book, We Are the Change We Seek, myself and EJ Dion. But anyway, the Philadelphia speech, which is the race speech. And he gave this really beautiful, really wonderful speech where he just laid out and explained to America race from both the black and the white point of view, and showed that he has a great understanding of both because obviously he's biracial. He was raised by his white grandparents, but he also is black, so he's sort of understands both. So he gave this incredibly nuanced and brilliant speech that in a lot of people's minds saved his candidacy and helped him to defeat Hillary Clinton in the primaries in 2008. Well, now apparently, because Donald Trump thinks he can do anything Obama can do, but he could do it better. That's his attitude. I could do anything Obama could do, but I could do it better. He's president. I could be president better. So now he wants to try to give potentially, allegedly, a race speech. How might that go? Because, the thing is, if Donald Trump gives a speech, generally, it would be written by Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller, who is the young, strange man who used to be Jefferson Sessions' top aide and used to write his speeches. And Jefferson Beauregard said, sorry, I forgot the Beauregard. Yes. Jefferson Beauregard, he's named after not just one Confederate general, but two. He used to employ Stephen Miller, and Stephen Miller used to write his speeches, and his speeches are weird. The American Carnage speech is a Stephen Miller speech. Think about that, but it's about race. And also, Stephen Miller has a notorious record of racial anxiety and rage that goes back to his high school days when he used to torment particularly Hispanic students in his high school. He's not exactly good on race. Let's just put it that way. And this is a guy who is alt-right, and we know what alt-right, which is incredibly ironic because he's Jewish, to be alt-right, because, white nationalism doesn't usually include Jewish people, at least not intentionally. So it's like, I'm not sure why he's alt-right, but he is. But, sometimes Jewish people, I guess, stray into alt-right. I think Bibi Netanyahu's son is alt-right, which is super weird, but it's true. So, so now you've got a potential race speech. So Stephen Miller would write the speech. Let's just set the stage for you. The speech would be written by Stephen Miller, perhaps with some help from Jared Kushner, because apparently he weighs in on these things too. Mr. Do-It-All, utility man inside the White House, who's done so great with Middle East peace. Well done. So that, and then you've got Donald Trump's VP, Mike Pence, having recently pulled in a roundtable to talk about race. And they couldn't get legit civil rights people to show up. So you know who they invited?
Candace Owens.
Wow. I mean, I don't even think she likes black people. She don't seem to like black people. And she's made some incredibly disparaging statements about George Floyd in depth. And so she is somebody that they brought to the table to talk about how do you improve the racial relations in America.
First has to love herself.
She doesn't like black people, so I'm not sure how she's going to help improve racial relations in America. So it's weird. Maybe Diamond and Silk should come. Who's going to be at this? Who's going to be at this round table? Who's part of the round table? Is it them? Is it the pastor who said that he was talking to all the gang members? the Daryl Scott. Is that who's going to help fix it? Is that who's going to do it? I guess maybe Kanye will go, but I think Kanye don't even mess with them anymore. I think Kanye might have walked away. I think Kanye might have taken off the MAGA hat and walked away. He used to say the MAGA hat made him feel like a superhero.
He was actually out there marching yesterday.
Kanye was marching?
Yeah, he was marching the day before.
So maybe Kanye has decided that he'd rather be back with the black people and start with the MAGA people, because
he wants to get invited back to the barbecue.
He wants to be back at the barbecue, and he don't want to have to sit in the car and eat his little light plate in the car. They may not even give him a full plate. I'm not sure he could get to the barbecue right now. He might have to really eat in the parking lot and just sit in his car with the air conditioning on, and then they'll bring him a plate and they'll festoon it with a little bit, but not everything, and not the big piece of chicken. He can't get the big piece of chicken for sure for a long time. And so, right. So it's, who's going to be at this thing? Who? It's weird. It's weird. But that, I think what's happening is that Gabe Sherman and also Axios has done a lot of reporting that internally inside of the Donald Trump campaign world, they know he's losing right now. That as of today, if the election were held today, Donald Trump would be beaten by Joe Biden probably by 10 points. And so because he's losing, and they now have to admit not just the external polls, even the Fox News polls show him losing in swing states, tied in Ohio, losing in Michigan, losing in Arizona, losing in Wisconsin, okay? Losing with a K at the end. That now they're panicking. And so what they're trying to do is to figure out how they can solidify the base that got him in the first time. And part of that is trying to keep suburban white women. They know they can't get the blacks. Black people ain't voting for him. They've got a ceiling on how many Hispanic voters they can get, and a ceiling on how many Asian American voters they can get, particularly since he's decided to name the coronavirus after China and to invoke anti-Chinese sentiment in the country in order to help boost his base. So he's not going to do well with Asian American voters. That ain't happening. So what he's got is white voters. That's all he's got, really. He's got a sprinkling of Diamond and Silks and a sprinkling of Clarence Thomases, and Candace Owenses. There's always going to be some of those. Watch Django Unchained, okay?
So you're saying to me that he's going to give a speech on race to win over
supposedly
or suburban
not to
white
win over
women?
black people, but to win over suburban white voters, because what he would have to do in order to save the suburban white woman vote is to convince
think that they're stupid.
No, is to convince white women that they're not racist for voting for him. And that's the thing. So what he would have to do, if he's going to solidify the white, he's already got white working class voters locked in. They ain't going nowhere. So that's that. White college educated men, the majority of them are going to still vote for him because people vote on race. I hate to, break it to you, but people vote based on race. And white Americans are by and large Republicans because the Republican Party is the party of white Americans, just like the Democratic Party is the party of black Americans. It just is what it is, right? So most white Americans are going to vote for Trump. And I think even most white college-educated men are going to vote for Trump because he does serve their interests. He does enhance the interests of white Christian men. He does it every day. It's all he does day and night. He makes them feel more powerful. He makes them be presumed to be more powerful. He gives them a leg up in terms of their social standing, even if they can't access the culture, which is very multicultural, very LGBT friendly, very everything they're not, at least in terms of the power that they feel they can wield. Donald Trump enhances that sense of power. So he's going to get most of their votes. But you can't win with just that. The thing about the American electoral politics is that it has become much more multiracial. And so Democrats only need 80% of non-white voters and 40% of white voters to win election. Ask Barack Obama, two-term president, won by 10 million and 5 million votes. Democrats really don't need a majority of white voters to win. That's the dirty little secret of American politics. They just need 4 out of 10 white voters to vote for Joe Biden. Now, right now, if the election were held today, Biden would easily do that. Biden is an older white guy. He's a traditional Democrat. He's not scary in any way that's going to scare white voters away. He can beat Donald Trump. That's why Donald Trump tried to get a foreign country to destroy him. The reason that Donald Trump was so determined to get Ukraine to destroy Joe Biden is that he ain't brilliant. He ain't really that bright, but he understands one thing, how to lose and how to win. And he understands that Biden can beat him, that Biden is the regular guy that he faked being in 2016. He pretended that he cared about the average regular old white dude, the regular man. Biden actually does. You can say a lot about Joe Biden. He's gaffy. He's a little bit of a close talker. You know what I mean? He's a little too, he's too huggy. Whatever you want to say about Joe Biden, Biden's a good man. He's a good guy. He's a regular Joe. He's a regular schmo. And so he can win because he's so knowable. It's easy to feel, I know this guy. I know Joe. Even if you don't know him, even if you never met him, you feel like you know him. That's the most high value proposition in politics, to be knowable, for people to think they know you. That's the thing that they had to do with Barack Obama, because people felt like, well, I don't really understand Barack Obama. Who is this guy? He seems weirdly foreign. Is he even American? Does he understand American values? That was the game that was played against him. And so what did he do to fix that?
Good old Uncle Joe.
He put Uncle Joe on the ticket. And all of a sudden people went, oh, well, if Uncle Joe likes him, if that guy likes him, he must be good. He must be all right. Joe's endorsed him. That was brilliant to pick Joe Biden. Now Joe Biden is the candidate. And so Trump has to run against that. He's not Hillary Clinton. He's not a woman. He's not a lady seeking power, which scares a lot of Americans. He's just regular Joe. So Trump internally, and this is Gabe Sherman's reporting, which is great, Axios is reporting, they know right now they're losing. And so Trump apparently wants to do something to reassure white women voters that it's okay to vote for him. White suburban women, it's okay to vote for Trump. That he's not a crazy racist maniac autocrat.
You are, Blanche, you are.
But you are, Blanche, you are in that chair. That's Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, for those of you who haven't seen it. That is a classic line, my favorite line, probably from any movie ever. But and it's the line in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane where Joan Crawford's character, which is actually Joan Crawford in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and Betty Davis were in this movie. And it's one of the greatest movies ever. Betty Davis is the bad guy and Joan Crawford is the victim. You have to see this movie. The two of them are completely role reversed from what their images were. So Betty Davis is the cruel one and Joan Crawford, no more wire hangers, she's the victim. And there's one part where she's in a wheelchair. She's in a wheelchair. She's confined to a wheelchair and her sister just mistreats her and abuses her. And she says to her at one point, she gets sick of being abused by Betty Davis, and she says, you wouldn't abuse me and treat me this way if I wasn't in this chair. And Betty Davis says to her, but you are, Blanche, you are in that chair. Classic. All right, so anyway, they know they're losing, and so they're trying to do something, and it's a bit of desperation that the Trump campaign wants to do something to put him out there. I think this is high risk. To put Donald Trump out to do a speech written by Stephen Miller about race, to me, is the highest risk thing you could possibly do. I ain't in the business of giving Donald Trump advice, but baby, if you want some free advice from what to read, don't do it. It won't go well. That's not going to help you. Not going to help you. All right, we have a great guest for the show for What to Read. We've got Kate Andersen Brower. We've got a really great guest. This is going to be really, really cool because she's going to give you a behind the scenes, not just of 45 and of his relationship to the world, but also his relationship to previous presidents. What's it going to be like, as we said, when you look back on history? What will the relationship be like between Trump and other former presidents, and what's it like now? This is going to be fun. All right, let's bring her in. And joining me now, I'm very excited to talk with Kate Andersen Brower. You may know her as the author of the #1 New York Times bestselling book, The Residents, and I'm going to sneak in some questions about that too. She may not know. But her new book is Team of Five: The President's Club in the Age of Trump. Let me hold it up. It is a very timely book. I was just saying to her before we went live. Kate, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Joy.
Absolutely. So you were on AM Joy. I felt like we didn't get enough time, so I asked my booking producers, like, can you get me in touch with her so that we can have a little bit longer conversation on what to read? So I appreciate you doing this. Team of Five. The cover of this book shows George Herbert Walker Bush, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and Jimmy Carter, all lined up in this sort of bipartisan, sort of milieu. They're all just, all interspersed. The idea that presidents who they come to office fighting it out, in just sometimes incredibly nasty ways in order to take over one from the other. And they serve in a lot of ways with the goal of undoing a lot of what their predecessors have accomplished. And there's such disdain between the parties. The idea that when they're finished serving, they have this great affinity to the extent that you would call them a club. Walk us through how that happens. Is it just that they empathize with how hard the job is once they're out of it?
I think that's key to it, is that every single one of them, and especially the five men who I talk about in this book. Unfortunately, it's only been men, right? So they really develop a sense of empathy for one another over the years. And even President Obama, although he always disagreed with Bush's decision to go into Iraq, disagreed with his handling of Katrina, those things never changed. But he's at the end of those 8 years that Obama was in office, he did feel closer to Bush. And you saw it after bin Laden was killed. Obama called Bush. That was the first call he made after everyone was safe, to say, look, we got him. There's a sense of continuity there that, no matter what party you're in, you're here for the country. And I know it might sound almost quaint nowadays, but I think we can get back to that one day. I mean, Truman said you have to remember that the 21 gun salute and all the honors are not for you. They are not for the president. They are for the presidency. And I think we've lost a lot of that.
That's a really good point. I'm going to come to the current occupant of the White House soon, but just a couple more things on this club and just on the closeness. I'm struck by a couple of different relationships. One of them you just mentioned is the relationship between George W. Bush and Barack Obama. This one's a bit personal to me because I quit media for a while to try to go and work to get rid of George W. Bush in 2004 because I was so against the Iraq War, and worked on a campaign to that regard. And Barack Obama, the thing that distinguished him from Hillary Clinton and I think advantaged him in that war was his stance against the invasion of Iraq. It was it's such a seminal and deeply felt feeling among those of us who were against that war and everything that came with that war, the torture, Gitmo, all of it. How then do they wind up in this relationship where Mrs. Obama is passing the hard candy to George W. by the end?
I mean, it takes time, and I think one thing that has brought both Clinton and Bush, George W. Bush and Obama and George W. Bush together was George H.W. Bush, right? And the respect that they all had for him. I mean, he's a World War II hero. He is somebody who, when he would come and visit the White House, Obama was so excited to see him because he represented a kind of decorum and honesty and integrity. And so I think it's the father that brought them together, really. And I think the relationship between Michelle Obama and George W. Bush, from my reporting, it's genuine. They do get along, but also it's for show too, right? It's that they want people to see the photo at the opening of the African American History Museum. They want people to see that two people who have very little in common on paper can get along. And I think it's more important now than ever before. And that's why we're going to see a lot more of it, I think, as we go into the election.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about a certain endorsement that seems offing. The other relationship, I think that you just mentioned it, you just teased it, is Bill Clinton and George Herbert Walker Bush, because there was this sort of famed story in their past where Herbert Walker Bush, they had to share a room, and Bill Clinton insisted that Herbert Walker Bush get the bed and he would sleep on the floor. And there's Jeb Bush would always say, I think Pop likes Clinton better than us, better than the kids. So that relationship I find fascinating too.
I do too. And the whole brother from another mother thing. I mean, it's cute, it's sweet. And Barbara Bush would call them the odd couple, and this kind of sense that they Clinton never had a stable father figure in his life. And so he did look up to Bush. There are some conflicting stories around how close the two of them were, but Bush would invite Clinton to come up and ride on his speedboat, the Fidelity, and Bush drove it really fast, and it scared Clinton in Kennebunkport. And so there was a lot of that bonding that went on. And going back to the '92 election, I mean, I didn't remember how intense that was. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if you did, but I didn't. And just to think of what Bush was saying about Clinton at the time, about draft dodging and all that. I mean, it was personal.
It was brutal.
Yeah. And the fact that they could move on from that, but I think things have changed a lot now, and it's gotten a lot harder. But one of the stories I love best in the book, and you probably would ask me about this, but it's the relationship between President Obama and Bush, and how they became so close, Bush Sr., and how right before Bush died, that's the last president that he saw. I was shocked by that. I mean, I thought that it would have been Bill Clinton or George W. Bush who would have seen Bush before he passed away, but it wasn't. And I think that just says a lot about both men, both Bush Sr. and Obama, just being really classy, people who were willing to look past a lot of things and form a real friendship.
It's interesting because a lot of my friends who are Black Republicans, they trace their, entry into the party as not being through Reagan, but being through George Herbert Walker Bush and Jack Kemp, that those were the two white Republicans who were the most welcoming and the least tolerant of racism in their personal experience. So I'm not that surprised by that with Poppy Bush, as they call him. And then the last relationship before I come to 45, which I've always been fascinated by this, is Carter Clinton. Because it is notoriously known that Jimmy Carter really didn't have a lot of use for his fellow Democratic president. How does he fit into that whole mix?
I mean, have you been down to Plains to see the Carters do their thing at church? Because oh, you should go. I mean, they do. So they have this really small church, Maranatha Baptist Church, and it's a tiny town in Plains, I think the population is less than 500 people. It's very small. And people come to listen to Carter every Sunday. He's not doing it right now, but he does these amazing sermons. And he and Rosalind Carter sit at the front of the church and wait for every single person to get a photo with them. So I mean, Carter, he is the most effective former president. And Bill Clinton, when he gave Carter and Rosalind Carter, I believe it was the Medal of Freedom, there's a wonderful passage where he says, "You have done more things for more people than any other president and first lady in history." I mean, they've eradicated diseases, but like you said, they had a really tough relationship with Bill Clinton because it goes way back to to when Carter had these prisoners sent to Arkansas. I mean, it's just like this, there's so much baggage there. And Clinton blames Carter for his loss when he ran for governor again. And then Carter, when Clinton was in office, he went to Haiti, he went to North Korea, and he brought along a CNN crew and did these interviews before he briefed Clinton. And Clinton just thought it was ridiculous. And so there's bad blood there, but I mean, I still think there's a lot of respect. And Carter's so interesting, I mean, even finding a photo where Carter wasn't standing off to the side of the other, it's hard. It's hard to get.
On the cover, he is the least close physically to them. He's smiling, but he's a little off, but it's you're right. Most of the time when you see all of those presidents together, he isn't really that intimately close to them, and it is fascinating. But then you know what? Eisenhower and Nixon couldn't stand each other either. So I think Nixon wanted to be liked by Eisenhower, but Eisenhower was like, no, that's not going to happen. Let's talk about the current occupant of the White House. Because he is notoriously absent. It is a team of 5, not a team of 6 in your book. How does he relate to these other presidents? We know how he feels about President Obama, but how does he relate to them?
So I interviewed Trump, and it was the easiest interview I've ever gotten. I mean, it just shows you that this White House operates unlike any other. To get an interview, as you know, with the president is a lot of work. And usually you have to you don't get emailed right away and say, when do you want to come in? I think it just shows that he, A, doesn't have people around him that are really sorting things out. And then B, he just wants to trash these people that came before him. It's an opportunity for him to unload on how, Bush had the worst foreign policy in American history. And he did go through some of that with me. And so he doesn't respect any of the former presidents. And I think that's the big problem, right? It's that he doesn't, I sat across from him at he was sitting at the Resolute desk in the Oval Office. And, that room is just so incredible. And you'd think that sitting there for a few years, it would give you a sense of empathy. And he said it absolutely did not, that he doesn't feel any differently about these men. I asked if he'd go to Obama's library opening, and he said, no, why would he even invite me? He did say he's open to a friendship with Bill Clinton after he leaves office. But can you imagine that happening?
I mean, Bill Clinton would not be his friend. I'm sorry. Bill Clinton is way cooler than Donald Trump, and there's no way. I mean, we went to the Tyler Perry studio opening, Jason and I, and Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton were there, fitting right in with all the celebrities. There is 0% chance that he would ever be friends with Donald Trump. Donald, you had, as you said, you interviewed Trump for this, which is one of the most fascinating things about Team of 5, is that you actually do hear from the sixth person, the sort of unnamed, sort of invisible sixth man. And as you said, there's no sense that being president has given him a sense of empathy for them the way it gave a Barack Obama empathy toward even George W. Bush, whose policies made, opposing his policies made Barack Obama president in a lot of ways. That has not happened for him. Did you get a sense sitting across from Donald Trump that it is because he is arrogant and thinks that he's better than these other men, or that he simply isn't capable of acquiring emotionally the empathy that it would take to make that journey?
I mean, that's such a good question to try to get inside his head. I mean, I think, at one point during our interview, he brought out a list, and I still have it. Oh yeah, it says Trump's administration list of accomplishments. And, at the top is over 5.3 million jobs created since my election. I mean, a single space list. And, I can't imagine Barack Obama or George W. Bush feeling the need to show a journalist who they've never met before a list of what they've done in office. I think he feels, and I mean, I'd love to know what you think, but I think he feels that he's not up to par. He knows that these men are smarter than him and they have more support from a broad group of people. I just think he feels like he's been ostracized, and he said he relates to Jimmy Carter. He thinks he told me he thinks Carter's been unfairly treated, and I think he feels like he's been unfairly treated, so he's going to just attack them, which he's been unfairly treated, of course, because he has gone after all of them. But I do think that deep down he knows that
he probably relates to Carter because being a one-term president is something that he senses he might be experiencing sometime soon. Did you get a sense from interviewing Donald Trump, and you're saying this is the first time you interviewed him? This is the first time that you had interviewed him and met him? Was this the first time?
Yeah.
Yep. So did you get a sense from him of why he wanted to be president?
I mean, I think so. He wears the shirt with the 45 monogrammed on the sleeves. He loves the power. It's the absolute top. I mean, there's nothing more powerful. There's nothing left. So I think it's about the power, and I don't think it's about changing policies or appointing conservative judges or any of the things that you think would be part of a Republican president's reason for being. I think it's just he's reached the top. There's nothing better that you can do in his mind. And so,
but normally power comes with glory, right? And for men who are of the type that just obsessively seek power, they genuinely also want glory or they want adulation. And Donald Trump is very much it's very clear, and probably the reason that he was willing to sit down with you, thinking he'd get a chance to show you that list, is that he wants adulation too. Did you get the sense that he understands that he will never get that he will never get the glory and he'll never get the adulation that these other men, even Jimmy Carter, who a lot of people think he was not a great president. He didn't get the hostages out of Iran. People, make fun of him with the sweaters, and they make fun of him with the, trying to put a solar roof on the White House. But he is considered a great man. Does Donald Trump understand that he will never be considered a great man, in your view?
No. I mean, what do you think? I think I asked him, do you think you'll fit into the President's Club? And he just looked at me and kind of smiled and said, I don't think I'll fit in very well. What do you think? And he knows that he won't fit in, and he knows deep down, I think that, why do you think on the inauguration, he said he had a bigger crowd than Barack Obama on inauguration day? I mean, it's this constant kind of one-upsmanship, but also lying, and it's juvenile. And no, I don't think that I kind of go between thinking it's just armchair psychology if he is really insecure and feels bullied, or if he thinks he is better than everyone. I mean, what's your take on it? Because I can't figure him out.
It's very hard to figure him out. Yeah. And it is armchair psychology. And, I get the sense that Donald Trump is a man who he has an innate sense of superiority because, that's part of having narcissistic personality disorder, that he's narcissistic. And so he thinks he's the best, and he wants to be the greatest and be seen as the greatest. But I think you're right. I think deep down, if you talk to people like Tony Schwartz, they'll say that he knows that he's not, and he's not going to be seen that way. And so he's angry. There's an African proverb that says, the young man who cannot feel the warmth of the village will burn it down to feel its warmth, and he's burning the village because he doesn't feel loved like Obama. He knows he'll never be loved like Obama or be invited to all the great Hollywood events. And I think he assumed he would. He assumed that once he had the power, suddenly he'd be at the Grammys and he'd be celebrated and he'd be, and he thinks that's what the presidency is. That's my armchair psychology take. Let's talk about what you think those the members of the President's Club, these the four still living presidents, what do you think that they will make of him when he's a former president? Do you see them reaching out to him in any way?
He's talked to Bush. He told me twice. And Bush, I'm so interested in the Bush dynamic because I would think that the most recent Republican predecessor, we already know what the relationship, as you said, with Obama is terrible. And what he said about Obama is awful. So, I mean, you would think there might be something there, but there's not. I mean, Bush and Trump have spoken twice on the phone. Bush tried to get Brett Kavanaugh confirmed. And so he would call members on Capitol Hill, senators, to try to push for his confirmation because Kavanaugh had worked for Bush. So they did work together on that, but they haven't talked at all. Bush has told one of his very good friends that if we can get through the Civil War, we can get through the Trump presidency. So, I mean, if that gives any indication of how bad he thinks it is, it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
So, and Clinton obviously can't, there's just so much. I think we forget. I mean, I still think back to that debate, and I'm sure you remember it like it was yesterday, where Trump invited Juanita Broaddrick and all these women who had accused Clinton of sexual assault to the debate with Hillary Clinton. I mean, you don't move on from that. There's no going back.
That was a Roger Stone classic. And the interesting thing about it is that of all of these members of the team of five, the one who was friends with Donald Trump, or at least friendly to the extent that Donald Trump has friends, because again, the Tony Schwartzes and Tim O'Briens of the world, the biographers of him, say that he doesn't have friends, that he has people he talks to, that he calls his friends. He calls everyone his friends, Kim Jong-un included. But the ones he was the friendliest with were Bill and Hillary Clinton. I mean, they were at his wedding to Melania. I've seen the red carpet. I mean, they were on the red carpet at his wedding. So it is incredibly weird that the one that he chose to do that to, because he was insecure about his own, what are we almost at 24 accusations of sexual assault and sexual harassment. And so in order to show, Hillary Clinton up, he did it. It is pretty incredible. And so I do wonder sometimes whether, I don't think he could ever even be friends with Clinton again. What about the idea potentially, and in talking to them, and I don't know how far back you spoke with these former presidents, there is a rumor out there that George W. Bush might endorse Joe Biden. What do you make of that?
I don't think that that's going to happen. And I've spoken with somebody very close to Bush that says that's not going to happen. It's one thing for Bush to say that he won't, support Trump. It's quite another thing for him to say he's going to support Biden. Yeah. I mean, I'd love to see it happen, right? But he's a lifelong, Republican. I think he would see it as a betrayal of the party. But I mean, his dad voted for Hillary, reportedly.
Yeah.
So, it's possible. I just don't know. Like, I was texting with this former cabinet, Trump, a member of Trump's cabinet who Trump fired. And so there's so many of them. I'm not even feeling who it was. And he said, is there any depth to which Trump won't sink? Is there any bottom to this? And so even the people who worked closely with him feel that way. And so I don't know what would push Bush into supporting Biden, right? I don't know what it could be. What is left to happen at this point?
What about, talk a little bit about the funeral of George Herbert Walker Bush? Because, the idea that a sitting president would not be invited to the McCain situation, the McCain funeral, the Bush funeral, like that is actually, in terms of history, it is a moment.
Yeah. I mean, so one of Bush's really good friends said this is W. Bush, because they really worked with Bush Sr.'s people to organize the funeral. It was so important to them that Trump show up. They really needed him to come because from their view, they thought that McCain's funeral became, all about Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And that's not what they wanted. And that's not what Bush Sr. would want either. I mean, he was an institutionalist, like to not invite a former president. Mm-hmm. I mean, for a former president to die is different, even though John McCain was kind of a legend. Yeah. It's different, it's different to have a senator. But I think that's absolutely true. Like if he didn't come, it would have been awful for the Bush family. And when I interviewed Trump, it was a few weeks, it was in March. So Bush had died at the end of, I think it was November. Yeah. And anyway, it was a few months after Bush's funeral, and he was so happy that he had been invited. Yeah. And he also was in a really good mood when I interviewed him, because it was right after the Mueller report came out. And I think about that more, that he really thought that he was off the hook. And so he was in a great mood. And I think that's why he wanted to talk. And at a couple points during the conversation, he asked me to remind him what subject I was talking about, because I was about first ladies. And he said, well, wait, are you talking about first ladies? Because I was asking about Barbara Bush. But so it almost seemed as though it wasn't entirely clear, even though my line of questioning was about the former presidents and first. So, I mean, sometimes I just think they run that White House in such a chaotic way. I guess that's not a newsflash, but he didn't really even know what we were talking about. It was so weird.
I'm going to read a little tiny bit from your book. We have a few more minutes left with you, but because I have a question for you, and the little mini header in it is, when the battle's over and the ground is cooled. Lady Bird Johnson, who was First Lady from 1963 to 1969, said a First Lady needs to be a showman and a salesman, a clothes horse and a publicity sounding board, with a good heart and a real interest in the folks from all over the country, rich and poor. She must take up a cause that's deemed weighty enough that it is worthy of her time, but not controversial. And she must plan Christmas parties, governor's balls, Easter egg rolls, dozens of luncheons and events, all while looking flawless. No easy feat. Is there a First Ladies Club? Because I think back to the First Ladies who are memorable, and Lady Bird Johnson, obviously, Jackie Onassis, Nancy Reagan, and obviously Michelle Obama. In her own way, Barbara Bush was a sort of ferocious figure. Is there a First Ladies Club?
I love that ferocious figure. That's true. It's so true about her. Yeah. I mean, there absolutely is. And I wrote a book called First Women about first ladies and about their relationships with each other. Jackie Kennedy and Lady Bird Johnson had such an interesting dynamic, because Lady Bird always felt that, she was not, as beautiful and glamorous as Jackie. And here Jackie forced out of the White House. I mean, the drama and the personal lives of these families, so fascinating. And Laura Bush and Melania Trump do have a relationship that I describe in the book. I mean, she's the only former First Lady to have any relationship with Melania. She's been to the White House a couple times, and she's tried to reassure Melania that, every First Lady gets criticized. So there is something to that. But Michelle Obama and Laura Bush have a great friendship too. But Michelle Obama and Melania Trump, as you might assume, have no relationship whatsoever.
I still remember when she handed her that big old oversized present on Inauguration Day. Michelle Obama handed it directly to her aide. You take this, please, get this out.
That was great.
It was crazy. And there is this great picture in the book for those who, of course, all of you will read this book, a team of 5 of the Bushes and the Obamas here. And it is still, to me, one of the most fascinating things that they are so friendly. I have to really quickly, before I let you go, I'm going to quickly pivot over to the residents for just a moment, because we just had the death of one of the longest serving ushers in the White House, who was somebody who really captured the Obamas' hearts. Tell us just a little bit about the ushers in the residence and what it meant for a Black family, for the Obamas to serve with them. I remember meeting Mrs. Reid, who was the first Black female head usher when my family got to go there for one of those Christmas parties. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, so there are about 100 staff at the White House, and they work there from one administration to the next. And Wilson Roosevelt German he was a doorman, he was a butler, he was 91 when he passed away, unfortunately, recently from coronavirus. And I interviewed him for my book, and I recently talked to his daughter, who told me, that the White House was his second home. And when I interviewed him, he said, listen, you see nothing, you hear nothing, I don't know anything, I can't, he was very respectful. Yeah. And he started during the Eisenhower administration. So this is the 1950s. You think of all that he saw. He knew Jackie Kennedy, Nancy Reagan, and Michelle Obama. And so, when I asked him what it was like on Inauguration Day when the Obamas moved in, he said that he and the other African-American butlers had tears in their eyes. And Desiree Rogers, who was the social secretary at the time, said how moving it was to watch these men who, were living through segregation, and to just see that these things could change was a really hopeful thing for them. And so they had a great relationship with the Obamas. Yeah.
You got any scoop on the current staff and how they feel about 45 and his family?
That would be a really good book. When they leave.
When they leave. Kate Andersen Brower, it's such a pleasure talking with you. The book is Team of Five. We'll hold it up here. You read this book. It's fascinating. On the back, the top praise for the residents, absolutely delicious, from the Washington Post. That's a hell of an endorsement. Kate Andersen Brower, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much, Joy. It's great to chat with you.
All right. Thank you. All right, I want to thank Kate Andersen Brower. This book is super cool, Team of Five. You're definitely going to read it. And, I am a sucker for it. Pictures. You're going to get cool photos in the book, which I obviously really love. So you will see her again on AM Joy because she's a really terrific guest. I'm glad we got a chance to have a little bit longer conversation with her, which is what we love about doing What to Read. It's a chance to talk to these authors a little bit more in depth. And all her books are really good. The Residents, also a fantastic book. So definitely pick it up, support her. And also give us a like. Share this podcast. We want to spread What to Read everywhere. We want everyone to enjoy it. So
subscribe, everybody.
Subscribe. That's right.
Everybody.
Hit that little bell. That's how you can do it. Make sure that you know when another What to Read is coming up. That way you can never miss an episode of What to Read. If you want to listen to it as a pure podcast, just hear it without seeing it, you can grab that anywhere that you get your podcast, Apple, wherever else you get your podcast.
Matter of fact, Joy, there's a link in the description. You can get it from there.
Well, look at that. Look at God. Won't he do it? Okay, so we're going to make sure that we hook you up, and we'll have more really great guests coming up on What to Read, and you're not going to want to miss it. All right, give us some comments. Tell us who you would like me to interview on this podcast, because we want to hear from you. We value what you guys think. All right, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you for another fabulous What to Read.